Do I click out of this?
Just minimize it for now because it's still setting it up.
Oh,
So
right.
just minimize.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Nice to see you. Thank you for
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Feel free to say hi and unmute
Hello.
until we get everybody here.
Hello,
everybody. Hi, everybody. Is that Teresa Marini in there, I see?
Yes.
Hi, Joyce. Hi,
Hi,
Joyce.
Teresa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Loving the snow and the 19-degree weather.
Actually, we have sun here today, and our snow is melting.
Well, ours did yesterday. It was 51 here, and today it's 19.
Oh, I think ours is like 40 something today.
Keeps everybody on their toes to have the weather be changing as much as it seems to be changing.
Oh, definitely.
I got to tell you guys, I've had enough of winter. It's not even pretty anymore.
Yeah, I tell you, we had 28 yesterday.
Even the dog doesn't want to go outside some days.
We're glad you're here, and we're going to get started now. So if you'd be willing to please mute yourselves, that'd be great.
Sure.
We will use the same format that we've been using throughout this series, in which we use in a general sense, which is to ask you to use the raise hand feature, and it should be somewhere under reactions, depending on the device that you're on. And if for some reason that doesn't work or it's not fast enough, this is an informal discussion, and you're welcome to interrupt and if you can find a chance and break into the conversation. And we want all voices to be heard, and we're going to have some fun today. And I've been hogging the screen.
Hi, everybody.
So just to refresh, we're talking about the 4 cornerstones of creativity. And we have talked about the fact that curiosity is the first of those, and that is the hallmark of the child, and that we want to keep our child archetype as close to us, and in whatever way that or form that is for each of us, because that is the doorway into joyful creating. Then we talked about clarity last week, and clarity is the second cornerstone, and the whole idea of that is that when we can get clearer about what our preferences are, how we like to spend our time, et cetera, that it also involves specifically how we like to spend our creative time, that when we develop this clarity around those various areas, then things start to go better, because we don't waste time on things that we either don't really enjoy doing or don't want to do and don't have to do. And so that leads us to today. And today we'd like to focus on community. And it's great that all of you are here, because this is such a wonderful example of community. And I'm going to turn it over. A few thoughts on community?
I think every time we kind of introduce the cornerstones again, and we've distilled this idea of strengthening creativity down to these 4 cornerstones. Obviously, it's way more complicated and bigger than that. But as I hear you kind of go through them, my thought was that it does seem simple when you describe it that way. But in my own experience, moving through curiosity and clarity takes years, even like a very long time, to get to the point where you feel so clear about something that you have found and love to do, that you begin to seek out a community as the next step in supporting that. And so I just that's kind of what I was thinking about, just hearing you introduce the cornerstones again.
Right.
Because even in my own mind, I think I can get into negative self-talk while I'm curious about this, and let me get clear about it, and let me find some people now. And it's not that that quick of a thing.
No, and you know what you've made me realize? I've never really been clear about this. I haven't, but you know what you really do, what you've pointed out here, Zena, is that we're talking about attitudes, adopting the attitude of curiosity over the course of a life, no matter how old you are. It's a life strategy that will always be useful. And clarity, it's the same thing. We go through periods of feeling really clear, and then we go through periods of not feeling very clear at all. So you're right. It would be foolish to make it sound as though this is something that you achieve and you're there.
Right.
Rather, a lot of this, I think, is it's the perspectives shift based on how old you are and what new information you've gathered. And I guess the main thing that when I started thinking about all this, what I thought for myself, and all this stuff is just lessons that I've tried to teach myself, is that I wanted to remember to try to be curious as much as I could. And that when things were sort of getting to a place where it wasn't working that well anymore, to stop and get a little bit clearer about why it wasn't working, instead of just assuming that if I figured it out and now it's clear, it's always going to be clear.
Yeah. I have felt, especially in the pandemic, and I think a lot of us can identify with this, that I feel very clear about needing a community. And that is a basic need that I've identified over the past few years. And it's not like I have some hobby that has led me there. It's not like I was curious about painting and then began painting and then sought out a painting group. It's just I'm moving through life and just need to find some support and so that's like, I guess, a different angle at coming in to these four cornerstones. It's not like they necessarily have to be in order, although being more curious about why I'm struggling and why I'm feeling down, and then finding a little clarity around, well, I haven't really had connection outside of my core family in months, you know, and then seeking out or what, getting to that third step. So it is all there and not necessarily tied specifically to some of these creative, more traditional creative endeavors that we have with painting and drawing. But I do have a question for you.
Okay.
I know we have a lot of birders in our family. Have you ever heard of the term spark bird?
No.
Okay, maybe some of you have. I don't. I was listening to a episode of This American Life a few months ago, and the theme of the podcast was birds. If you're not familiar with the show, definitely check it out. I love this one specifically. I can share the link. But the introduction was Ira Glass, the host, was interviewing this 16-year-old boy who lived in like northern Minnesota somewhere, who was just an avid birder, and it was a passion of his. He didn't really come from a family of birders. There weren't a lot of kids at school that were into birding, but he just really got into this community and loved it, and was telling Ira about this concept of a spark bird. And a spark bird is the bird that got you into birding in the first place, this like creative spark within you that just sparked some sort of passion. And his was the turkey vulture.
No kidding.
And it was just why I bring this up is it just made me feel happy to listen to how excited he was about this random thing he had found that not a lot of people are into, but it drew me to him and wanting to learn more about him, to hear his excitement about this thing. So it started making me think about community and how really to find a community that is authentic. I think for myself, I have to look inward first and be very centered and aligned about what brings me joy and what I love to do. and then just do my best to exude that.
Mhm.
And I think that will in turn draw in people who will kind of match that. And maybe we're not into the exact same things, but it's like a level of passion in life. Does that make sense?
It doesn't. It's making me think that we could each stop and think about what our spark bird was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
was my spark bird when I know what my spark bird was. It was sitting at my grandmother's knee, literally with a jar of buttons and pouring them out on the floor and sorting them out over and over again and doing different combinations. I'm convinced that that's where my love of textiles came from.
Yeah.
Karen, glad you're here.
Muted.
Thanks.
There we go.
I think I'm unmuted now. I'm glad I'm here too. And Jane and Zena, the picture I'm getting is like life. It's a spiral. It's a spiral of going deeper into curiosity and then clarity, and then you come back around again sometimes to visit curiosity again. And so it's a spiral of a process.
That's a good way to talk about it. Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
No, and I was thinking of it, this isn't a spiral, although that image works for me, but I was thinking about how sometimes you're outside and it's a perfectly clear day and there's not a cloud in the sky. And that's like the moments of clarity that I feel I have. And then the next day I get up and there are clouds on the horizon, and that they're constantly moving. This week it was so windy, you could literally watch the clouds moving across the sky. And I think that's sometimes what it feels like too, is that we thought we had this great clarity achieved and then it clouds over, but that we have to keep going with it. Joyce.
Okay, something that Zena said about community and being authentic. And I think authentic is the key word to the right community, because I've been in some groups that, I wanted to learn from and they were good, but it wasn't, the people there were not authentic. It was, I don't want to say fluff, but their sincerity wasn't the same. And that could be a very detrimental community. So you want to make sure that you're someplace where the people are authentic about why they're there and what they're doing and what you want to share.
I've experienced that for sure. But on the other hand, looking back at some of my experiences where I was kind of entering a new community in various forms, I think I had some sorting out to do internally so that I could show up authentically, and I was not. And at the time, I blamed myself, kind of like, well, these aren't the people for me, or XYZ, whatever, and then left when in actuality, I could have shown up in a more authentic, real way. And I was just scared at the time to do that. And so that can be, I think I'm getting better at that as I get older and go through that experience, I think a few more times, but it's both.
I think that's a growing process too, because, we've talked in other contexts about the imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah.
And I think that, it's a complex subject, and I really can't say that I've been completely comfortable with being who I am until fairly recently. And I can't tell you why that is. I can only say that, one thing I admire about many of the people that I've met through you who are your age and your friends and you, is that you're willing to look at these things at an age when I would have still really wanted to keep the wraps on completely. And I hope that's a trend, but I also think that I don't want to lose track of Joyce's point, which is that finding any community can feel risky because we feel so vulnerable when we put ourselves out there in a way that it's sort of a paradox. It's like you've got to really risk yourself in order to find yourself with like-minded others, if that makes any sense. And we're always talking about CST, and I know a lot of people who are here today have been or are part of CST, and that's really the underpinning of the whole thing. You can talk about art till the cows come home and creativity in lots of different ways, but let's get into it. The clock is ticking. And I think that when you have other people who are willing to be vulnerable and take that leap with you, you can just feel the electric energy of it.
Yeah.
Lindsay.
Hi there. Yeah, Zena, I just really support what you said about the process of going within, and it ends up always going full circle, I think, to coming back to me and figuring out, am I being authentic? And what the other person said, I missed her name, I might find myself in a group where people are maybe not at that place yet. And maybe I want to be at that place, and I've decided that might not be the group for me. They just might not be ready or available to do that. But checking in with myself too, like, how authentic am I being? How, I don't have to share anything to be authentic, right? I mean, I can share, but to be authentic with myself it takes a lot of effort. I think it's hard to recognize that sometimes I might be looking, and I'm speaking for myself now, I might be looking to the group to give me something that really is something I need to get from myself first, if that makes sense. And then I might be able to get it or share it or whatever. So it's this kind of ebb and flow. And Jane, what you said about one day it's sunny and one day it's cloudy, I mean, that's kind of what you said. I mean, life is like that, but it's not comfortable when it's not sunny, and I want it to be sunny. So I might think this is uncomfortable to me, rather than recognizing, well, wait a minute, that's how life works. It's like it's a wave. It's not a straight line. And that's really, I guess, a lifetime journey to get because there's always going to be things that bring up to me, no matter what they are, the discomfort when the clouds are out.
Yeah.
Like, that's never going to stop.
Yeah, and I've just been writing about the child for March and joy, and how inextricably woven they are. And I think that's one of the things that has been sort of poignant to focus on in the writing and thinking that I've been doing personally, because isn't it challenging, when you have a parent who's in final stages of life or some other cloudy atmosphere, to remember that there is joy there. In Khalil Gibran wrote in The Prophet, your joy is your sorrow unmasked.
Yeah.
And I think that, I have to say that in the context of community, that's when we can be real with each other. That's sort of what isn't that really what we want? We don't all have to share the same interests, but we can have a shared sense of the poignancy and the ups and downs, and just be there in a non-judgmental way for other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, that reminds me that when you're relating to other people, like you have a partner, or you have a daughter, or you have a husband, or it doesn't have to be them, a friend. I mean, you're also traveling at different speeds, and you're in different places at different times. And you can remember the time when you were down and they were not, and vice versa. And that to me is the supportive aspect of what we do here, which is we're not going to all be in the same place at the same time, but we can resonate with those spaces, if I'm down, I can resonate. Well, there is a time when I won't be, or if I'm up, I'll resonate with there is a time that I won't be. And sharing that journey with other people while they're kind of, doing their up and downs, I guess.
Yeah. And from a creative standpoint, I think, that can be as simple as somebody being in a slump.
Right.
And you're not. You're in a period where you're really sailing along and getting lots of creative ideas, but you know what it's like. We all know what it's like to have been in a slump, so we can be sensitive to that and encouraging. I mean, I can't get you out of your slump, but I can be there.
Right.
I a little bit of I don't hide it. I was pretty depressed last year around this time. And a friend of mine started texting me every day just to check in and say hello. And it was an incredible gift from her, but it was also incredibly comforting for me to know that somebody, William Stafford wrote a poem called The Thread, and the final line in the poem is, "You never let go of the thread." And I think that's whether we have a community that's a handful of people or we have a larger community where we've actually been able to attach to more people than just a few close friends. I think it's that hanging on to the collective thread that has really, especially in the past few weeks with what we've been dealing with here, it's amazing how comforting that is. And I'll say that Nat mentioned here that a felt sense of safety is a prerequisite to the experience of belonging, and that takes time and resources. So we wouldn't want to act as though this is something that we just we're not all pricking our fingers and being blood sisters and blood creatives or whatever, which is a terrible example. But this isn't instantaneous. It does involve allowing people to sit back and not have to say anything until they're ready, but still welcome them there. Lucy.
Hi. I think for me, one of the most important things is that, and my experience has been especially this last 2 years, is that we go on with our groups, whether it's virtual or otherwise, and there's no affirmation. We have to speak about it. We can't just sit back and think that everybody's thinking the same thing we are. And I think to be in community, that one has to express one's desire for it, number one, and number two, to recognize it and to speak it, to verbalize it to the group. And I found that has been very, very life-giving especially in like a quilt group that maybe I wasn't such a big fan of to begin with. And once you open yourself, then all of us, or recognize or even verbalize the fact that, hey, I'd really like to find some community here or something like that. And then all of a sudden people open up and you begin to develop clear relationships. I mean, this kind of world that we live in is just so vague and, unsatisfying in so many ways. And so for me, I think, especially CST, I mean, who would have thought that in a virtual world that it would have helped me to create relationships outside of CST, to be more authentic or to be more open and affirming of those beginning relationships that I have outside of CST.
Well, I think that it all ripples out. And I love what you're saying, Lucy, because, once you start practicing being as authentic as you can be, and of course we have to acknowledge that we're all entitled to healthy boundaries.
Right.
That's part of being authentic. But when you start practicing at one place, you don't just turn it off somewhere else.
That's right.
It's just how you start living, and it's such a relief.
Yeah, and to know that, in the end, whatever it is that you're thinking or feeling, if you're in the right group, if you're with people that are going to be your community, they're going to be accepting of that and affirming of that. And you can be that way of them, whether you may agree about anything. It really doesn't matter. It really comes down to, is this something, is this a situation or a relationship or relationships that I want to have and to invest myself in it? And I agree with Zena. You get yourself in this little hole and it's like, oh, just let me go home and hide again, because it takes effort. It takes a lot of real thought and real reaching out to other people, doing stuff that maybe you're not that comfortable with in the beginning, but and also I think really important for me is not to make judgments about a group until I've really had a chance to get to know them better. That for me is key. Amen.
Amen.
That makes me think of the next part of what we were going to talk about, which is introversion and extroversion and how you interact in a community. And I think showing up and being, well, it's hard for all of us to be vulnerable and kind of state our needs in a group, especially a new group of people. But I'm thinking back to some experiences I've had where we were forced to do icebreakers or something at the beginning. And there were a few people who just said, I don't like this exercise. This is not fun for me. I'm an introvert. I am here for this reason, and I hope to get this out of it, and I'm happy to be here, but I am an introvert. And just stating that in a way and like setting the expectation of how that person was going to interact in the group. And then from then on, I don't know, maybe because I'm an introvert too, it drew me to them, and then we could kind of create a side friendship within the group. But I just admired that that someone would just say that outright.
Well, especially an introvert.
Exactly. Yeah. So
yeah. Wow. So society of introverts.
I just think entering a new group like that, that's just one small step an introvert like me could make to state my intention and my purpose of being there, but also be more authentic for myself too.
Well, and there you just have to decide what you're comfortable sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you have to grow into it, just like the comment we had earlier, from Nat, it takes, people can sit at the back of the room for a long time and still be completely engaged in taking it all in, and then have some sort of an epiphany moment where the energy just shifts and they feel like they want to say something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the other part of all of this when it comes to a healthy community. Nobody's sitting around thinking, well, why doesn't she ever talk?
Yeah. It then goes to the other members of the group to respect that too and not push the person, but be continue to be welcoming and supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when that just grows the trust
Mm-hmm.
and the sense of belonging and safety, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a really interesting lesson in that one time in one of my mastery programs, which of course is the same group of 12 artists who were coming back 4 times over 2 years. And during the second week, I was sitting down with each of them, and I sat down with one of them. This was all private in another setting away from the group activities. And I said, you never really have very much to say. And I just want to check in and make sure that you're glad you're here and that you're feeling like you're getting something out of this. And it was so interesting. She looked right at me and she said, well, she didn't use the word introvert, but she said, I'm kind of a quiet person, but it doesn't mean that I'm not happy to be here or that I'm not learning anything. And when I went away from that later, I thought that was really more my insecurity than it was about her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted the validation that I was a good teacher. And so that was an interesting lesson to be introduced to myself in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when I started realizing that you have to assume everything's okay until somebody says it isn't okay. And that's why you have to encourage people to feel free to speak or write privately or whatever, so that you know, because the other thing I would never want to do is have somebody who was feeling left out. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
This
yeah.
is the
Oh,
granddaughter story.
Yeah.
So the almost 5-year-old says to her parents, I feel left out right now when all the attention is going on the 18-month-old. And I think that's so healthy. And yet it's something that's so hard for us to do, especially as adults, to say to another person, well, I feel really left out right now and I want to be included. Zette, glad you're here.
There we go. I just wanted to say, because I'm an extrovert, I get my energy from people, but I'm a shy extrovert. So I think it's important too when we talk about our personality types that we consider that there is this, it's like the onion, and you peel back the layers, and there's, you just keep peeling back layers, exploring who we are and what we're here for. And I know last year was my first year in Deep Dive, and I did find myself sitting on the back row, but I was engaged, but it, as of right now, it does take a bit of me to get up the momentum to speak and say something. So I just want to encourage people who are new to creative strength training and Deep Dive to just hang in there and be with it. Whoever you are and however you're doing it is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what's so fascinating about human beings in a general sense. Don't use that, is that you can be an extrovert, but you like to work from behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a lot of organizing and you're not necessarily the person who's in front of the camera all the time, but you know, in a way, that's sort of what a networker can be.
Right.
Have a networker archetype, or people who can really get lots of other people together and they enjoy doing that, but they're not necessarily always in the limelight themselves.
Yeah, I have realized that that's one of my definite part of my is the networker.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Val. You're muted, Val.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Something that's a challenge for me, and I'm right in the middle of the introvert extrovert spectrum, is that in a group setting, when people are talking, and this can even be among close friends, if there's that appropriate pause to interject in, virtually everybody in the world seems to be quicker at jumping in than I am. It's like there's some lag between brain and mouth. And so I end up being even more quiet than I actually am, which can be frustrating sometimes. And this may not be the forum to solve that, but it certainly is a challenge.
Mm-hmm. I really identify with that. Completely before I say them. And my husband's the exact opposite. So when we're having conversations, it's just I have to work up the energy to like combat. I don't know, that's not the right term, but like it can be, I guess.
It can sure feel that way. It can get me pretty frustrated, especially I'm retired now, but it especially would in work situations.
Yeah.
There are a lot of more type A aggressive personalities in a typical business environment.
And
well, that's why we need the concept of the talking stick. Native American cultures, where in a group, and when I do a critique, I always keep in mind something my sister Mary taught me, because she taught legal writing, and she said there were always the blurts. The blurts sit in the front row. And they always are blurting out things right away. They want to talk, and so I've been in critique groups where I felt like there were blurts in the room, because they were quick always to say what they thought about what somebody else was working on before the person who was presenting even had a chance to say what they want, what kind of advice they wanted. And so I developed this strategy of running a critique by saying that before anyone actually said something, they had to wait for a pause and say, "May I speak?" and be acknowledged by the person whose work was being critiqued, so that the pace would slow down a little bit. And the way to begin the critique was to say, here's the work I'm working on, and then be very clear about what kind of advice you want to get. I just want you to say that you like it because it's finished and I'm not changing. Or, I think the color's slightly off. Let's focus on color. So somebody can't say, well, I don't like that big old shape you've got over there. It's not about shape, it's on color right now. So I really appreciate both of your perspectives on that. And it can, so.
I have to say, I admire the blurts too.
Do you?
I don't think it's necessarily always a bad thing. I think the strategy you develop for that situation is appropriate. But in interacting with some of my friends who are just more extroverted or just talk more freely than I do, I think that's a good way to get through some ideas and definitely be more creative, because you've shared something and then it's out in the world to kind of discuss, maybe even if it's not, or be challenged and defined or refined. And sometimes I just hold things in for too long and question it. My perfectionist is just super active in that realm of my life. And so I admire people who are just willing to put their ideas out there and have them challenged or debated and continue the conversation that way. So I don't know, maybe that's a little bit of a tangent to what you were, the blurt archetype.
No, it's all, it's all good.
About.
It's all good.
I do admire that.
Carla, your thoughts?
I was going to say I am one of those people that is a pretty dynamic extrovert, but I'm an only child. So, and I had parents that I, struggled with. So I would go off to my room and I could, just be by myself, and I was very creative. But I think about it's interesting that I hold on to, unfortunately, those moments when I was forced to talk in a class or whatever when I didn't want to. I do notice that I have a tendency to, maybe because I work so hard when I do a workshop or when I take a class, I'm doing it, for myself. But sometimes I just don't want to work in that moment. And I do like just absorbing what's going on. And then I go home or I take whatever it is. But I remember when I was 8 and my parents sent me to our local art center, to take a class. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because the teacher never said, we're going to do this and then we're going to create this character. And then you're forced to share your character and do a story. But she did that and I hated it. And I was so terrified. And I didn't want to take a class for a long time after that. My mom would say, do you want to do summer school? Do you want to do this? There's things available. And I was just mortified because I didn't want to have to talk. I always felt like my art was speaking for me. And that was definitely true. And then even when I got into high school, when I was in my classes, I was like I was the loudest, the most dynamic. We had a dress code. I wore all kinds of weird stuff. They gave up on me. But my teacher learned that I didn't always work in class. I worked at things. I helped others. I played with different materials. I went home and did my work. And she never, like some parents help their kids on a project. She just knew that I needed that for my ability. And so, that is what I learned about myself. And I still, as an adult, I will show up to things and not always leave with something finished. And that's okay with me.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Oh, it takes all of us. Marilyn. I think you're muted, Marilyn.
Yes, and now I have something in here.
There you go.
Can you see me? I don't. Anyway, I'm thinking about. I'm an extrovert, And in community, in this community, I'm learning much more about not blurting, but often my blurting does come from excitement and energy. And I'm having to take a look at that and think, usually it's after the group, if I've blurted or been excited about something. And so I think I'm learning in community to learn to manage myself in a way that I don't think I have in the past. I think that in work sites, there's more of a containment, maybe more control. And so here we are in a creative community, creating, and that speaks to my heart and my excitement and my energy. And so I tend to jump and express. And I am with, I don't remember who just spoke, but I do too, often not really create much in the moment with other people. I think about it and I play with it, but I don't think I do a lot with it unless I'm sitting at home experimenting. So
thanks. Well, you're really making me recognize, and so as are some of the comments, how important it is. Well, we are who we are, but I think in general, all I really ask of myself as somebody who used to order everybody around, I started teaching classes and realized it was hurting cats and I wasn't going to be able to do it. But for me, the longer I've taught, the more I've recognized that one of the jobs of a good facilitator, which is what we try to be, is to make sure we create an environment where everybody has a chance to talk and where people who are excited and which can be misunderstood as dominating the conversation or could dominate the conversation under certain circumstances, how to help those people hold back just a little bit so the more reticent people who are in the back of the room can. I'll check back with you. I'm just going to. Sorry, we had somebody unmuted there. The whole goal, isn't it? When we're in conscious community, which is what we wrote in the handout, when we're in conscious community, we have chosen to be there and we do what my husband calls, I don't really like this phrase, but frankly, it fits here. He refers to doing a checkup from the neck up. And, so it helps us to realize who we are and how we function so that we can make the most of who we are. You think
I like
that's funny?
that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
It grates on my nerves. Anyhow. Anyway, what does that really mean except that we figure out what we're contributing and we want to make sure the balance is working out okay. So anyway, for what it's worth. Sherry. Sorry.
Thank you. I had a great insight. Speaking of herding cats, this is Gigi. And I used to be a blurter and I didn't even realize it was being a blurter. But as my age advances, by the time the conversation gets around to, I have this great rejoinder or this great statement to make. And by the time the conversation gets around to me, it's gone out of my brain. And so I think I've really pulled back and I'm not, communicating as well. I'm not joining the conversation. I'm just kind of sitting in the back. So I need to work on that. But thank you. That was a great insight.
You're welcome. Glad you're here. Barbara.
Well, I'm a blurter and somebody that a lot of people tell me I should be quiet most of the time. But I think it's interesting. I went to Catholic school pretty much all my life. And it was raise your hand, you'll be called on eventually, be good. And when I went to college, there were other Catholic girls there, but they had come from public school. and they didn't raise their hand. And maybe they were blurters. And my immediate reaction is, oh my God, how rude, how, so forth. And then I began to admire them. I mean, they were within limits. They weren't rude, really, but they had a freedom that they felt they could blurt. And I get criticized many times that I talk too much. And I think my basic problem is I can't stand a void. If there's silence in the room, I feel I have to come forth and say something. And I'm trying to be helpful. I don't think I'm trying to dominate the situation. I'm just trying to give some help. But as I get older and older, I think you also have to see that some people don't really want help. They're happy just the way they are, and that you have to accept that after a while. But I do think your upbringing has a lot to do with your freedom of thought and expressing yourself.
I think that's true because I had a really funny experience. You were there. You probably don't see it the way I saw it, but so I'll make it fast because we have some comments and I want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak. But we were at a wedding, my niece's wedding in Nashville, Tennessee, and we were all staying at a Comfort Inn. And so here are all the Dunawalds and those connected to the Dunawalds in the breakfast room. And then there was another family who was having a wedding, completely different. We didn't know them, no idea. That family shouted back and forth across the breakfast room. Hey, do you want some eggs? Hey, would you like some fruit? Want me to bring you some coffee? And all the Dunawalds are looking at each other like, what the hell? Because we would never do that in public. I won't even yell downstairs to ask Wayne to bring me a cup of coffee. And it's just kind of, you have to laugh at yourselves. We have to laugh at ourselves. It's crazy sometimes to have that kind of a realization. And really, when that was happening, I kind of admired how they were.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but it just makes me think of my husband's family. And I don't think they're just louder and more gregarious than our family is, but I love them. I mean, I love
their energy. They're really boisterous. I wish no one will ever describe Jane Dunawald as boisterous. So there you go. Karen.
Hi. I'm one of those people who's like that borderline introvert, extrovert. When I'm alone, I mean, I can be alone for days and be just perfectly happy. And when I'm with people, everyone goes, oh, you're so outgoing. And so, I know that thing Val was talking about, because I would find, and this has been all my life in a group, I'll wait for the pause to speak and someone will just jump right in over me. And so she had talked about going to just holding back. And I noticed that Nancy had put in the chat about being interrupting. Well, I became an interrupter because it's like, damn, I've got something to say. And so when I was in my 20s, I was in a graduate program for counselor education. A very close friend who I'd known since high school one day said, well, you're always jumping in and interrupting. And I said, you haven't noticed that other people won't let me talk. And so we had in counselor ed, you have a lot of things where you have to speak out and you're in groups. And so we were in a lot of classes together. So several days went by and he came back and went, you're right. they do that. And I thought, listen, at that point, he'd known me for more than 10 years. And so it became that, and I'm still aware of it. And sometimes I go, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. But when I don't, it's 40 years later, it's the same experience. So I just well, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I've also noticed that when I'm in groups with my creative women friends, that's how we talk all the time. I mean, everyone's excited. It is the excitement thing, as was just said. We're all jumping in, and then sometime 30 minutes later, go, well, what was that we were talking about? Because it takes, and I'm comfortable with that. But I do know that I never thought of it so much as being a blurter as I've had to interrupt just to get into the conversation. And for someone who can talk a lot, that's pretty weird. So that's it.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks. Well, I think we're going to scrap our exercise.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it at the end because I'd rather hear the comments. Cindy, welcome.
Hi. One of the things that happened to me in my work career is I had been really quiet, really quiet. They were questioning why wasn't I speaking up, etc. Well, then they sent me to Dale Carnegie. And you take that class, and I got to tell you, you get done with that, you become a blurter. And you become, whether you're an introvert or not, you be able to reach out and do things. And I had one person question, oh my God, why did we let the genie out of the bottle? So you can be an introvert and go that way. Since I retired, I've tried to step back as being a blurter, and I tend not to be that unless it's a group I'm really comfortable with. And so I've now found myself where I'm restarting all new communities, having moved. I have no established communities. And so I've got a couple of groups I'm trying to feel my way, and I'm in that little corner in the back.
Yeah.
And so this is a really helpful thing to listen to and think, so I can think about that. How am I going to approach this thing? The other thing I wanted to do is say, you guys really do make people welcome, and just their whole, in the first thing, non-judgmental, makes it easier to get on and talk than like in these other little groups I'm getting into. I'm like very uncomfortable because that's the first thing I'm thinking of. They're going to judge me and then peg me in this one corner, and then I've ruined that group. You know what I mean? Anyway, wanted to say thank you for that. And this has been enjoyable.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I think a lot of us who are introverts, one way or another, I never went to Dale Carnegie, but being thrown into a classroom, you really, especially if you start out with kindergartners, it's all a learning experience. It's all good. Teresa.
Hi there. I am definitely an introvert and have always been. Large groups make me very nervous. And I have been told that I'm a good listener, but when I do try to interject, people talk over me. I can't get a word in edgewise. And I've just started being able to say, wait a minute, shut up, I'm not done talking, but mostly it's to my family. I mean, they are talkers. I'm telling you, they're talkers. And a couple of my friends, and I'll say, I'm not done talking. Let me talk. But it's still very difficult for me. And even now, like talking to this group, I'm starting to feel comfortable because you make me feel comfortable. You make me feel like I am welcome, like I really have something to say. And I can't tell you how good that makes me feel, how comfortable I feel even raising my hand to say something. So this is really a big step for me. And I appreciate it. And I thank you both very much.
Well, you're welcome, because we mean it. We look forward to these sessions, and everybody's welcome. Everybody's fascinating. Everybody has a story that if we can slow down and give each person a chance to tell their story, there used to be what you might hate, a warm-up thing that I did in my classes sometimes that was, you wouldn't, I'm teasing you. Called, 2 truths and a lie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so the idea is that you tell 3 things about yourself, and 2 of them are true and 1 of them is a lie. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't even have to play 2 truths and a lie with people. If you just give people time to talk and to tell their stories, it's always interesting. I just never get tired of listening to what people have to say. So thanks for the nice vote of confidence, Teresa.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. And thank you so much.
Sure. Adrian, hi.
Hi, good to be here. Okay, so I'm an extrovert and a blurter and a spokesperson who's learned to be a good listener. But kind of in my spokesperson role, I'm going to get a little vulnerable and share a couple of reasons why I'm always really struggling with the whole idea of authentic community and blah, blah, blah. And one of them, the easy one, is when I'm in creative mode, like in a workshop or making something, or even in a critique group, I'm in this kind of nonverbal, art focused, what I'm making focused space. And I don't even know the names of the people in my class, and I'm not looking at what they're doing. And if someone talks to me, I have to go and get my brain back into like, oh, I can talk to people mode, because my head is totally in what I'm making. So over the past year with Zoom classes, it's been kind of cool to have a Facebook group afterward where I can actually look at what people are making and encourage them and show stuff and see stuff and get to know people a little bit. So that's one of my obstacles to creative community. But I think the really big one is I have a very active saboteur, and it's a relationship saboteur. I was kind of journaling about it yesterday, and I decided the personification of my saboteur is my stepmother. So I have an evil saboteur stepmother who tells me, you don't belong, you're not like us. If people see the real you, they're not going to like you, and you don't fit in. And I've had that experience in my family of origin, but also, you know, a couple of times in other group situations I've been in, where as long as I played the good Christian woman and towed the line and, you know, smiled appropriately, I was loved and accepted and valued. And as soon as I let the real me out, woo boy, you don't belong. You can't be authentic in our authentic community. So I'm just a skeptic, I guess. And I hear things like authentic community, and my little heart goes, yeah, right. So I don't know, that's just, you can't fix that, but that's where I'm coming from and I'm trying to deal with.
Well, I think it's really good that you even say that. One observation, I'm sorry if I cut in, you were going to say something, but one thing I think is that there's a difference between being in a class setting and being in a community. And I think as an instructor, my observation only is that I don't really want people to talk to each other and chat each other up in a classroom. I'm enough of a purist. They're there to learn, by God. I'm putting my time into it. And I want you to pay attention. You guys can chat at lunchtime. Now get back to work. That's how I feel about it. And it's the time around that, you know, around it, the mastery program is one of my good examples. Around the actual work sessions we had meals and people could talk and build community there. But the classroom was a different, I didn't really see that as serving that purpose for what it's worth. And then, I think calling out anything that feels like an elephant in the room is exactly the thing to do. And that we have to be careful that we stand by and live our values.
Mm-hmm. I think there are plenty of examples of communities where they brand themselves as authentic in some way, but you have to fit some sort of role to be a member, and that is not authentic in my eyes. That's the difference for me. If you have to change something about yourself or how you come to the group to fit in, then that's not.
Yeah, so maybe there's a difference between being like-minded and being authentic, and some groups want everyone to be like-minded.
Right. Yeah.
Nancy Dazenbrock is nodding her head. I know, Nancy, you never get a word in edgewise. I'm aware of your comment now. Go ahead. All I see on the screen is Hendley, so I don't know whether that's a first name or a last name, and then Nancy. And we'll wrap it up shortly. If you need to go, feel free.
I don't know why it just says Hendley. I don't know how to change that.
Okay.
I just real quick want to share. We live in the Piney Woods, and I do a lot of walking. And I found this. I don't know. Can you see it?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. A vine that makes a circle. I can't see myself on the screen right now, so I don't know what you're seeing. Anyway, so I was participating in a Unitarian Zoom service on Sunday, and they were talking about community. And it just is a marvel to me how when we are aware of something, it just starts popping up everywhere. And that's happening to me a lot since I've been in this community, which is awesome. But anyway, they started talking about this Zen model, I guess you call it. It's a hand-drawn circle called an enso. I had never heard of it. And I thought, that's just like that vine I found in the woods. But it's just gonna be my thing, not my archetype, my symbol for the foreseeable future, because it's all about, we have our circle, but we stay open to whatever everyone has to contribute, and that we learn from them. So I know time's up, but I wanted to share that. Thanks.
And what was your first name again?
Karen.
Karen.
I'll figure out how to change it.
Okay. We'll remember it from now on, but I just didn't recognize it on this screen, especially with that visual. How could we forget?
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Thank you,
Karen. Nancy.
Karen, I love that. That is so wonderful. I love that enso idea of having a circle, but it has openings. It's lovely. So, about introvert and forgetting words, about introvert and extrovert. I used to have a job, like a part-time job in a clothing boutique, and it was so much fun, and I loved the customers. I felt like I was a therapist half the time. These people would come in and want us, me to work with them and find them things and tell them what looked good. And I just loved it. It was great. And so my boss said, I'm looking at the schedule here. What it would be your dream schedule? And I said, well, gosh, I would love to have several days in a row off. And that way I could recharge myself, because I'm really an introvert. He goes, oh, you are not. You are the most extroverted person, because he only saw me in that context. And I was, but I couldn't be that if I didn't go home and have my quiet time to recharge. And so whether I talk or not sometimes depends on, what's been going on in my life. Yesterday, we were out in the world doing errands, and my husband asked me, well, so today, do you want to go to do this and that and the other? I said, well, not really. I feel like I just have to be quiet. I can't, and he gets it. He totally gets it. So I'm really lucky there, but I think that describes a lot of us. We all have a little bit of extrovert and a little bit of introvert.
Thanks.
So, thanks. Thank you.
Welcome. 3 more comments. Marilyn, you're up.
It just occurred to me that maybe I'm looking at the archetypes with this conversation, and the teacher in me, and I've been having a little difficulty looking at the teacher, but I think there is that need to inform or help, and that drives some of my energy when I may be over talking too much, informing too much. And so I'm just thankful that we're having this conversation, and that I can take a little more information in about the teacher. I would like your take on that too, if I'm out on. Anyway, I'd like your take. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Marilyn. I've realized that I'm so determined for people to understand what I'm trying to teach them that I say it 5 different times, and I should stop at 2. Basically, because they glaze over. I mean, I learned that lesson the hard way from my husband. My new husband. Today we've been married 6 years. So I finally learned a lesson not to keep teaching him over and over again, just to say, assume he's smart enough to get it. There you go. Avril.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I feel this is a very authentic community. Last week, I think there's somebody called Ginger. She just came and said, "I'm frightened. I'm fearful," or something like that. And I just thought, oh, thank you so much, because I thought it took an awful lot for her to say that, and I thought, well, that's me. And you know what Zen is saying, I have hardly been out for 2 years, so I've forgotten how to speak. Almost, I can only say 3 sentences. That's it, really. So I just want to say it really is authentic, this community, and I'm very excited to be part of it.
And we're delighted you're here again. Glad to see you. That's true of everybody. Angie.
Hi. I moved into a new community in 2015, and I started a job, and one of the girls, and I find a lot of times people won't talk to me. And one of the girls had said, after working with her for about a couple of months, she says, you know, when you first started here, you jumped into the room and you made a big entrance, and I didn't really like you. And it took me several months to get to know you before I decided that I'm going to talk to you and get to know you better. And now that I've gotten to know you a little bit better, you're really nice. And since then, I haven't wanted to go out into public and talk to anybody. It just makes me feel so lonely. Because I don't know how I show up. I have learning disabilities, and my mom said when I was little, I used to just sit in the corner all the time and draw flowers. And so I don't have very many friends, and it just, I mean, it's nice that she said that. It's nice to know how I show up for other people, but at the same time, it's frustrating because I don't know how to change. And this is who I am. And it's sad that people don't want to get to know me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, all I can tell you is we want to get to know you. And I have gotten to know you this year through the emails that you and I have shared and through some of the other things that we've shared. And that's very painful. And we're not a therapy group, and so we have limits on how far we can go at talking about these kinds of things, but we are a group of potential friends, and we are a group of artists who are supportive of each other for all the right reasons. And that's what we have to offer. And I think I can speak for both of us when I say that's a heartfelt offer. And that what I see around me all the time, whether people are enrolled in CST or they're not, doesn't really matter as much to me as what matters in these conversations, where we're willing to look at hard things and understand and say, you know what, Angie, you're a cool person and it's going to be okay. We're here.
And that's why I joined again this year, because I feel like I'm welcome, and I feel like I'm allowed to be who I am.
Yeah.
And so I thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Janice.
I just have one quick question, because I've always, I hear people talking about introverts as people who go out and they talk a lot. My understanding was that you get your energy either by being around people or by being, you recharge yourself by being alone if you're an introvert. And if you're not, you're an extrovert, that's where you get your energy and you're recharging. Am I misunderstanding?
No, that's right.
Okay.
Maybe we.
And is there going to be a link for tomorrow?
Oh,
Yeah.
No worries. Yeah, we got a little off track. What we were going to do this afternoon, actually, or this evening or this morning, wherever you are, what we were going to do is invite everybody to write a personal ad for the kind of community that they'd like to be part of. And then we were going to give you 5 minutes to do that writing, and we were each going to write one, and then we were going to share them. But as it turned out, the conversation that we had was a conversation that it was just unstoppable. And I think we both agreed that we didn't want to stop it in order to do something that might have felt contrived at that point. But it is something, especially if you print out the handout, that you could do for yourselves. And if you're a member of the Creative Strength Collective on the Facebook page, you could post your ad there and see who pops up. So Angie, I know you can write the right kind of ad, and before you know it, you'll have a handful of people who would really like to get to know you better. And we all have that. We all have that ability to make that happen. And yes, if you're coming tomorrow to the workshop that's been rescheduled because of the issues with my mom last weekend, what are we going to do? I mean, are we going to send a link? Where is it? I don't know. I have no idea.
For tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
I keep having trouble finding links to all these things.
Yeah, sorry, I know it's complicated.
I think you sent an email with everything on it, and I can't find it.
This one is a little more complicated because we rescheduled, but I'll send a new link to everyone enrolled in tomorrow's workshop in the morning for you to join.
And come prepared to play, because it's going to be a really fun 2 hours. I'm looking forward to it. And then there's another one next week too. So I know it's a lot, but right now, we're just on fire around here, and we just want to share it with everybody. So there you go.
I have one more question. Next week's Friday afternoon, is it at 1 o'clock also, or 12 o'clock Central Time?
Same time as today.
Okay, because for some reason I wrote down 3 o'clock.
Well, that's okay. I think one of ours was later because of a conflict. It's modern life. It's literally zooming by.
Yeah, my old brain is having trouble keeping up.
That's okay. It's going to keep you keeping track of where we are. Okay. Well, thanks for making time to be with us today and for sticking through to the end and for all your comments. And
just quickly, I will share the link. I think, is that to the podcast I mentioned? I'm not sure what link, Annie. I will share that just because it's a great podcast. But tomorrow will be recorded, the workshop that's separate, and that will be recorded too.
Yeah.
And
okay. Yeah, can we get the link you mentioned earlier? You covered that. And the class tomorrow will be recorded. Mm-hmm. And this was recorded. So it'll be on YouTube right away, won't it?
Yes.
Great. I'm learning. Okay. That's it for today. Have a good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are, and stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.